it's great that we have a class dedicated to using color in photographs because colors are all around us, right? And colors affect how we feel, right? This clear morning sky can make us feel alive and free. We can be affected by the reds or purples in flowers. There's a feeling that the green spring can evoke with life and energy. There's an intensity to the black black night, pitch black sky, which can be kind of mysterious. And color is a really powerful visual communication tool. It's why companies spend dunk trucks of money developing the perfect shade for their to-go cups, or why 75% of the pencils in the US are painted yellow. Colors evoke feelings and associations and experiments and experiences. And there have been plenty of studies done where we know that a lot of us as humans make quick judgments 90% of the time about a purchase just based on color alone. And of course, we need to keep in mind that a lot of color associations are culturally based. And it's important to remember what these trends are because they do change, right? But some of them still are always, these are cultural, such as red and green evoking Christmas, or black and orange reminds us it's Halloween, right? A lot of colors have cultural associations that can influence the way your presentation or design is received. Brands rely on these existing associations to present themselves as a certain way, such as, brands that use that trustworthy gray color or an exciting red color. It's a meaningful way to wordlessly add value to your message. And you should constantly be asking yourself, what do my color choices evoke? Whether it's conscious or not, colors evoke a whole range of emotions in us that many times lead us to enjoy a setting, feeling drawn to a particular product, or even rejecting a specific idea. They're practically a subliminal, visceral level that sometimes we take for granted. So knowing this, it's important that anyone who wants to become a better visual communicator should familiarize themselves with the basics of color theory and how to choose the most effective color schemes for presentations and visual content. To help you on your journey while we are figuring this out, I've made some useful tips for choosing harmonious and impactful color schemes that may have the power to move your audience to a specific action. Just like how people are often judged by their physical appearance, so will your content. They'll be judged by the design and the elements used, and many times by color, and many times before it's even fully read. We talked a little bit about hue, saturation, and value, or intense hue, saturation, and value, or color tone, in my previous presentation. And understanding hue, value, and saturation is critical for creating beautiful color harmonies. And they're the three basic components of color. Hue is most often what people think of when using the term color, and it corresponds to its position in the spectrum here and the color name itself, right? Violet, blue, yellow. In scientific terms, hue is the spectral wavelength of a color that produces the perception of being that color. Value is the relative light and darkness of a color. This is what you see when you can say a white and black and white photograph. Each color has a different value chart, which can be which can be shown in this chart here. And then, of course, saturation or intensity has to do with that richness, intensity, or purity, or grayness, right? Desaturated aspects of color. You've probably heard me use intensity, which is a pretty common used term, rather than saturation. Chroma is also another term for the saturation of a color here. We're going to start with the primary colors. It's important to know what each color actually means to your audience. So these are just the primary basics of color theory. The color wheel, which you saw earlier, was first used as a model to illustrate the relationship between colors and how those colors can be mixed. And they are the basics of all colors. So the primary colors are red, blue, and yellow. They cannot be made from mixing any two colors together. And as their name implies, they're the basis of all colors. Secondary colors are derived from the combinations of the primary colors, and they are violet, green, and orange. So as you can see here, these are made as a combination of the primary colors to produce your secondary colors. And then lastly, there are the tertiary colors, which are created when you combine a primary color with a secondary color, resulting in 6 new colors, such as orange and red, making red-orange, blue and violet, making blue-violet, and so on. These 12 colors compose the complete color wheel. And the way the colors are organized corresponds to the color's wavelength in light, which is why essentially how our eyes can differentiate shades. And so the color wheel matters because we can understand relationships, how they form a basis for using them. The wheel can also be used to talk about tones, tints, and shades, depending on how you blend things together. As I reviewed before, the tones, tints, and shades are how you can make a variety with your hues. When a color is mixed with white, you create a tint. That's what this second is here. When the color is mixed with gray, you get a tone. And when the color is mixed with black, you get a shade. Tones are often duller than the pure hue. So tints are when we add white to a color. Tones are when we add gray, often desaturating the intensity, and shades are when we add black. Black and white aren't on the color wheel, you will notice. And why do you think that that is? And it's because it's not a color. Black simply is the absence of color in terms of light, right? Black is the absence of light. And white is the presence of all colors simultaneously. This is the easiest way for me to describe that. So, of course, we have to understand why some colors work and how they are identified with each other. Here you can see how some colors are associated with an emotion or a concept depending on cultural context, right? Such as red meaning passion and love or energy or danger, purple being royalty or wisdom. So you can use this, basic graphic here as a nice way to start thinking about common associations made, at least in the West, with these colors. There are certain rules in combining colors and making color schemes. And we should go through the process of creating different color combinations. Aside from using the color wheel suggestions, you might look for nature for inspiration of what colors work together, right? Seeing what's on a bird or sunsets, or any other way that we can make an array of color and see how they go together, right? The peacock palette or butterfly colors. Creating a mood board is usually pretty helpful for work like this. You may have used or heard the term harmonious themes, such as the words cool or warm or monochromatic, to describe sets of colors. So let's do a brief rundown of each of these mean. So we're going to start with the classifications of colors depending on their placement on the color wheel. For example, here we have warm colors, and that's because their position on the color wheel are around the reds, oranges, and yellows. Cool colors are on the opposite side of the wheel and are usually more of greens, blues, and violets. To create complementary color combinations, you would select 2 colors that sit opposite of each other, such as a warm color like orange and a cool color like blue. Split complementary colors are comprised of 2 adjacent colors to another complementary color. So you can see it's kind of making this triangular shape. And we have these lists here that show, go Gators. We have this red, orange, and yellow, orange paired with blue, right? Here we have this red, violet, and blue, violet paired with yellow. You can see these split complementary colors. Tetratic color combinations, essentially, you can see here we're essentially using geometric shapes to put 3 or 4 colors together in the color wheel. Triads being this triangular shape, and tetratic being this larger one. Another great way to make a really beautiful color scheme or color combination is simply by using analogous color. Analogous colors are sitting next to each other on the color wheel, so they have very similar. They have a similar, color quality. You can see that it's generally low contrast, but it will always go together. Monochromatic is a type of color combination that's made of different tints, tones, and shades of the same hue. So there is no variety in the hue. There is a variety in its saturation or intensity, as well as how dark or light those images, the color may be. Choosing an ideal color scheme can be difficult. There are a couple tips that you can keep in mind while you're trying to select your color schemes. Besides the ones that are covered above, there are a couple other things that we should think about. And one is high contrast. For example, it's important to create high contrast to achieve impact. For example, in a presentation, if you use a dark background, it's a no-brainer to use a lightly colored font. Or if you've chosen a monochromatic color scheme, then you can accentuate important details with a complementary color on the other side of the color wheel. So perhaps with our monochromatic one here, we can use a popping rust or orange color to accentuate something. Since all hues have the same levels or similar levels of saturation and value, it's good to consider how we can combine hues and varying tones and shades to make an effective color combination. So here we have this nice high contrast in a complementary color scheme, right? Where we have a couple varieties of this yellow-green hue. This looks like a tint, a shade, and a pure. And then, of course, we have this tint in the shade of a violet. To wrap up this presentation, I would like to reiterate something I say in class often, which is keep it simple. You've probably heard this before outside of my class as well, but when it comes to design, less is usually more. Keep it simple and don't use too many colors. The color wheel can help you limit yourself from choosing too many hues and cluttering your work. It's important to note that color theory is still personal for each viewer. The same shade of fire engine red may remind you of apples, and it might remind another person of the time they broke their ankle and rode an ambulance. If you're worried that your colors are overwhelming or may scare an audience, reduce the number of colors you are using or throw it in a monochromatic shade in the place of a brighter one. Refer to the wheel as needed, edit the feeling, and keep it simple. This image here that I'm showing you by Edgar Payne is a good example of an artist who's controlled their components of color, being hue, value, and intensity. There are 4 levels of value here. We have dark, dark gray, light gray, and light. There are 3 levels of saturation. It's very saturated in the foreground. There is a middle saturation in the distance, and then a weaker saturation as if it is foggy or hazy, right, in what is considered the distance or the background. There are 3 main hues here, orange, violet, and green, which form a secondary color harmony.